And we're live. I am borrowing a computer from my sister because I decided that my computer last week was thirsty and it wanted a cup of tea. So it drank a cup of tea all over the keyboard. So I'm on my sister's computer. I have no idea if you can hear me. Somebody's here. Can you give me either a thumbs up or a comment? Can you hear me? Because I'm speaking on a different setup here, and it's my first time doing a live with this particular setup. So let me know. Can you hear me? Hello, hello. Fake news with Gangish. You can hear me. Glad to have you here. How's your sloppy, wet, snowy Monday morning going? Fake news? What's happening in your world? Did you have to drive? The roads weren't too bad for me coming in this morning. It was pretty easy. Today is Monday, January 23rd. Isn't that Michael Jordan's number? Not that I'm like a big sports basketball person, but Michael Jordan, you know, that man's wingspan just is inspiring. I had an ex-boyfriend that had a poster with Michael Jordan and it went out for miles. Yes, fake news, 23 Jordan. Imagine if we could take flight like that. You had that poster. That's awesome. Was it inspirational? Like, why did you have it? What effect did it have on you? I just, that man is a legend. I'm going to be talking today. It's kind of turning into this series about freeze to flirt. And we all go into freeze all day, every day. And yesterday was the new year, the lunar new year. And so apparently we're moving into the year of the rabbit. And I was looking up rabbit, and the like medicine of rabbit is actually pretty cool because one of the things that rabbits do really well is that they move very quickly from freeze to action and then back to freeze. And we can really learn from rabbit, and maybe that's what this year is all about is moving from freeze to flirt. Like, and when I say flirt, I don't always mean romantic partnership. I mean like I'm engaging with life. So it's a Monday, a couple people here. Let's hear from you. How did you flirt with life over the weekend? What did you engage with over the weekend? Did you go for a walk in nature? Um, did you have a conversation with somebody? Somebody you know, somebody you don't? Did you play with your dog? Right? You're going to take your dog out for a walk. That's in a way engaging with life and flirting with life. So let's hear from you. What'd you do over the weekend? I had not one, but two high teas. I went to my cousin's for high tea. Oh God, fake news. I don't even know if I want to read that one out loud. That is definitely a way to engage with life. You found a headless hawk at the park. Was it a red-tailed hawk? Because that's actually like my medicine, like from a shamanic primal standpoint, red-tailed hawk is like my totem animal, my most medicine. A headless hawk at the park. That is really curious to me. Like, who takes down a hawk? He's pretty dark brown. Did he have red tail feathers? Not that I'm an expert in hawks by any stretch, but like, who takes down a hawk? Like, they're serious predators of the sky. Like, there's not a lot of. How does that happen? How does a hawk get taken down? Who takes, to whom? I guess it would have to be a land animal. What kind of animal can take down a predator of the sky? I don't know. Tell me. Do you know? I'd love to know. So you're the rabbit. Happy Lunar New Year. We're moving into this rabbit, and the rabbit is like the best example of how to quickly move from freeze to flirt. And just that right there is a nugget for you. If you want to know how to get out of freeze, study a rabbit. Like they're powerful. My dog loves rabbits, and I have watched them many times. They go from frozen, inaction, alert, but frozen to like get out of dodge. So if you want to know how to get out of freeze, watch a rabbit and study that medicine. It was probably an owl. Wow, that's insane. Like who takes down an owl and how? Nature. It's remarkable. It's crazy. It's crazy, crazy. It's crazy because I don't understand it. And I guess that's the nice thing about nature is that we don't have to understand it. I think we just need to respect it and learn from it. I'm realizing that I'm missing a sheet because I want to start getting into today's content. It's 10:30. Starting here live. Who else is here? Where are you from? There's a few people here. Where are you tuning in from? What's your name? Where are you from? My name's Renee. I'm from Denver, Colorado. It's a square-shaped state in the middle of the US. Where are you? Who are you? What is your name and where are you chiming in from? So I'm Dr. Renee Ostertag from Denver, Colorado. What's interesting about my Denver journey is that it started in Switzerland. It went to California, to Colorado, to California, to Australia, and back to Colorado. Kind of a world traveler over here. What's really weird and interesting is that I was actually, my parents were both born and raised in Switzerland. And so I was technically made in Switzerland. And the reason why I think that's weird and that I know that is that my grandmother used to be so proud of that fact. And she would tell my older sister, hey, come, come. That's the room where Renee was made. And so I'm sort of like a Swiss made, American born hybrid, European parents. Parker, Colorado, boxing and bulldogs. Welcome. It's good to see you here. I'd love to hear who else is here. And what color are you in? Boxing and bulldogs, fake news. What color are you? Who else is here? Where are you from? Last week, we talked about freeze to flirt. We did the week before and the week before and the week before. We're building a story here. And before we get into that, I'm going to formally begin with my name is Dr. Renee Ostertag. And I am a physical therapist and a psychotherapist in the state of Colorado. Oh, we've got a couple people here coming in from Ukiah. Hello from Denver. Hi, Karen. It is great to see you. Happy, happy. Um, this is educational in nature. If you are in need of medical care, please go seek that out for yourself. This is not intended to be formal medical care or advice in that way. So it's educational in nature. And disclaimer, I am a human. I am a licensed doctor of physical therapy and a psychotherapist. And also a gloriously biased, imperfect, and fallible human. So, just so you know, that's where I'm coming from. All the colors of the maps. Hello, hello. So, freeze to flirt. How do we get from a stuck place in life to a more engaged place with life? And last time I talked about this map. And it's a beautiful resource given to us by the author of Permission to Feel, a lovely gentleman named Mark Brackett, who has a PhD in psychology and founded the Yale Center of Emotional Intelligence. And he says the emotional skills in Western civilization today is pretty dismal. Brene Brown's research reinforces that because she says the average American knows 3 emotions and can name them: happy, sad, mad. And yet we need at least 30 to live a wholehearted life. And the more we can name a variety of emotions, like 100 here from the Yale Center of Emotional Intelligence, the more rich and full our lives can be. And so I like this map because there's a number of ways you can look at it, right? Like you can look at a map of Denver and you can see a flat map. You can see a Google Earth map. You can see a topographical map. Each one of them gives you different information. And it's the same with this map. We can have different information through numbers, through colors, through words. So this map is a beautiful way of mapping where is my nervous system at in any given moment. And I can use words, I can use colors, I can use numbers. And so just this brief overview down here on the x-axis is how pleasant is my state right now? How pleasant is my experience with life right now? And there's 1 to 10, pleasant. Now, for many people, side note on this, they're so used to orienting to pain that it's really challenging to consider I'm not feeling anything pleasant at all. Okay. But I'm in a world of hurt. Okay. So sometimes we have to reverse engineer the pleasant and look at it as what's the opposite. So if I'm in a world of hurt right now, it's a 9 out of 10. Okay. So that's one that isn't pain. So that's actually technically a 1 pleasant because pain and pleasant have an inverse relationship. So you can orient to your world through pain or pleasant, do the math 1 to 10. And you can orient through energy. Where is my energy right now? I'm high or low. And it's not that low is bad and high is good or good is bad and low. It just depends on what you're wanting and needing in life, right? Like I don't actually want to be in high energy if I'm trying to sleep. And I don't want to be in low energy if it's time to go run a marathon or do something hard at work or have a challenging life experience that requires courage and some higher energy to push through. So we have pleasant and we have energy, and then we have a whole bunch of different colors and words. And so the blue quadrant tends to be lower pleasant, lower energy. And we have words like sad and depressed, drained, pessimistic, exhausted. So that's the blue quadrant. And then there's the green quadrant, which is higher pleasant, but still lower energy. And so here you have words like satisfied, secure, serene, cozy, content, carefree, balanced. And just even as you're hearing these words, notice if they're words that you use or not. Are they words that are a part of your vernacular? Are they words that are a part of your experience? The yellow quadrant is higher pleasant with higher energy. And here there's words like enthusiastic, optimistic, playful, um, energized, exhilarated, ecstatic, elated. Okay, so these are high energy, high pleasant words. And again, notice, are those words that are familiar to you? Are those words that you commonly live, eat, breathe, spink? Did you know that when you combine speak with think, you get spink? Sometimes I like my improv skills. So I make up language as I go, friends. That's how we do that. So you can spink your way into yellow or not. But just getting curious is a really good way to start orienting your awareness so that you can start engaging more, right? And the red quadrant here, higher energy, lower pleasant. And here we have words like nervous, furious, apprehensive, worried, anxious, troubled, concerned, livid, furious, panicked. And again, notice these words. Are they words that you use a lot or a little? Are they words that are familiar to you or less familiar? And so this is the map. And if we want to move from freeze to flirt, we need a map because you can't get somewhere if you don't know where you're going. Now, I will say too, we can get frozen in various places. We can get like a high freeze stuck in like a panic attack. We can get a low freeze stuck in a no motivated, helpless pit of despair in life. Sometimes I get frozen in a meditative state and very little motivation to take action is there. And it's just sort of like I'm frozen in time, but it's not an unpleasant freeze, which makes sense because that's higher pleasant. And then there's the high freeze of I was stuck in yellow the other day, actually, and I couldn't get out, and it was annoying because I was in this, like, really hyper state, right, which is right there, and I needed to focus, and I couldn't get out of hyper over to focused because I was stuck there. So here's my thoughts for you today. As I have read through these 4 colors and given you some examples of the different words, right? And there's the numbers and the different axes. Um, which one's most familiar to you? I'm not saying you like it or that you want it to be this way, but which color is the most familiar to you, right? Which one is the one that you go into most often? Which one is the fastest reaction for you? Where is and what color is your default mode network? And when I say default mode network, that's a particular circuit in the brain that sort of runs when nothing else is happening in life. I think of it sometimes like a thermostat setting, right? Like my thermostat in this office is set to 70. Sometimes it's 72, sometimes it's 82, sometimes it's 58 or 64. It's always changing depending on if it's winter or summer. Is it daytime or nighttime? Is there a lot of people in here? Is there not a lot of people in here? But it's always trying to get back to 70 because that's its setting. That's its default mode network. What color is your default mode network? So, the 4 selves and this map. I want to talk about this because it was inspired by a patient of mine. And we had this very cool conversation about your favorite self. Like, which colors of these is your favorite self? So I think there's 4 selves, which coincidentally coincides with 4 colors. There's your favorite self. There's your most dreaded self. There's your most familiar and your least familiar. Okay, so my most familiar self is actually red. My favorite self is yellow. My most dreaded self is blue. And my least familiar self is red. And so this taps into like, what's the one you relate to the most? What's the default mode network for you? For me, it's actually red. Like I run anxious. I run kind of high energy. And that's just the place that my system tends to go to first thought. And really good example this morning, I got a text from my sister about something that's a sensitive spot for me in my life, and I immediately went to red, and I was perceiving that she was attacking me and, uh, calling me vain. And it took me like 20 minutes. I just like put the phone away. I read the first line. I didn't want to read the rest because I was too triggered and pissed off. So I put the phone away and I just like forced myself to focus on something else. I actually asked a friend of mine, like, hey, can you read this text and tell me if I should read it or not? Because I just can't deal with this right now. I'm about to go onto a YouTube live. I just don't want anything to do with this. In a way, it was a blessing. My friend didn't get back to me, and I was able to settle down. I was able to calm down out of that red state, and then I was able to access some curiosity. I was like, "Okay, wait, I'm not I'm feeling more grounded. So let's just see what this text was about. And then I read it and it was freaking lovely. And so my most familiar self was read. Oh, Summer's here. Hello. I'm guessing Summer's from New Mexico. She could be traveling somewhere famous. I don't know. Well, it's good to see you here, girl. So my most familiar self is red. And this morning, uh, i- here's what happens when I'm in my most familiar self unchecked is that I'll interpret the world as red, and it may or may not be red. My sister's message to me was incredibly kind, supportive, and helpful. And yet I picked one word out of a sentence and I made up a whole red story about it. And then I went into attacking her and I was preparing what I was going to say in my head. Like, we can create a red world when we're living in red. And red is my most familiar self. It's my most chemically comfortable self. It's my default mode network. I'm not saying I like it. I'm not saying it's pleasant. I'm not saying what I'm saying is that it is what it is. And that's my default mode network. We all have one, right? Summer's in deep red today due to her own sister. Hey, man, cheers to you. If I had a cup of tea or a water, I would cheers to you. I'm so glad I'm not alone, right? That most familiar self, that most chemically comfortable self. If it's red like mine, I can guarantee you'll have neck problems like stiffness, tightness, pain. And mine shows up as irritable bowel. It's the best. So this is this idea of my most chemically comfortable, my most familiar self, my default mode network, my thermostat setting. It has expressions and effects on our relationships and on our physical body. Cheers from beautiful Española, New Mexico. Scooter Lee, good to see you. Thank you for joining us. I don't actually know where Española is. I spent the new year in New Mexico, actually with Summer, who's here, and my boyfriend, and we went to Ojo Caliente near Taos, and it was gorgeous. So tell me, where is Española? I'd love to know. And so right now, you just watched me shift more into my yellow self, which is my favorite self. Okay, so we have four selves: um, most familiar, least familiar, favorite, and dreaded. My most familiar self chemically is red. I'll own it. Who else has a most familiar self of red? Own it. Raise your hands. Oh, Caliente helps with the red for sure. Balanced Rock Solutions. Good to see you here. You're not far from you. Chromo Co. That's so cool. So Balanced Rock and Scooter Lee are close to each other. Summer, your most familiar is red. Espa. Espa, I love that, is between Ojo and Santa Fe. I bet I drove right past you. I just shifted my state and I'm in my more favorite self. And I can feel this exchange with these people here. And it's a yellow place. Let's see. Right now, I'm going to do a quick. Let me see if I can find the numbers or the words because I'm in yellow. I know I'm in yellow. I'm like an 8 pleasant, and the energy feels like a 9 to me. So if I'm at an 8 pleasant and a 9 pleasant, motivated. I'm motivated. Absolutely. There's people here that are listening and we're engaging and and connecting with one another, right? And so this is like one of my most favorite selves is yellow. It's hard for me to show up as my favorite self when I'm stuck in that most familiar self. Summer asks, would you say our most familiar self was wired from early on? Yes. And childhood wounding. Totally. Um, and it doesn't have to be big stuff. I have a memory of being a kid and I had a stomach something. I don't even remember what it was. I just had stomach pain and it wasn't going away. And my mom was a tough lady. And she took me to the doctor, which tells me it must have been pretty bad because she had all kinds of natural remedies that she'd give me. And we never really went to the doctor. So if my mom took me to the doctor, she must have been scared. And so when I think back on that memory, I have kind of a real positive, aspect of the memory, and I had to train that because it used to be embarrassment when I thought about the memory that I'm about to tell you, but now it's love. And so I'm maybe 6 or 8 years old, and we're driving home from the doctor, and I get this wave of bowel urgency. And I start screaming and yelling and crying, and it's hurting, and I need to go to the bathroom. And I'm sure I'm freaking out. And again, my poor mother didn't know what to do. Right. And she says, just go. And it stopped me dead in my tracks. I had to poo in my pants, and she said, "Just do it." And and so that's kind of embarrassing, like taking a dump in your pants is embarrassing, and to have a mother that loved me so much that she was willing to help me get cleaned up and, like, "Take a shit in your car, Renee." Like, that's fabulous, and I'm telling this story for a reason. Like, who loves you that much, right? Who loves you enough to say, "Shit your pants in my car, I don't care, I just want you to feel better." So that's like a childhood wounding, but it's not wounding, it's a stressful event that had a registered memory, and it's very connected to my most dreaded self, which is blue. Oh, I love Scooter Lee, Balanced Rock. Y'all are just amazing. Thanks for chatting and chiming in here. So, we have our favorite self, which for me is yellow. We have our most chemically familiar self for me, which is red. My most dreaded self is definitely hands down blue. Now, for me, my dreaded self of blue lives straight up here in my gut, but it's kind of connected. Oh boy, the lights changed. It's kind of connected to the red. And so my most familiar pattern is to cycle between red and blue in my body. And the health effects of that are irritable bowel, which is why I mentioned that before, and neck pain, back pain, relationship problems. So, where does it come from? It comes from events and experiences that happen in life that shape us and shape our nervous system. My least familiar self is actually green. And that shows up in my lack of harmony in certain relationships, struggling with meditating, and struggling with healing. So these early impact environments, right, and events and experiences. Is this resonating with you, Summer? What's let's pause for a second because I want to talk more about a few things. And I get on these tangents like my bowels in the car when I was a kid. That in and of itself is a teaching moment, right? You have a thought and then it cascades down an event. Like when I think about that, um, it has an effect today, even though it happened a long time ago, right? So these events that happen a long time ago affect us today. So your 4 are totally the same as mine, and it's all resonating with you. That's great. So, your least familiar self, for me, my least familiar self being green lines up with like my fear of stillness. Like I always have to stay busy. I always have to be on the go. I always need a full schedule. I panic getting places early. I don't like having empty space. So here's the thing I want to say that I think is promising is that once we have awareness of our most familiar self, our least familiar self, our favorite self, our dreaded self, these things can change. Like I'm working on green becoming my new default mode network. I'm working on green becoming the place that I go to. But I have to get used to those chemicals and I have to get used to that feeling. So I find it hopeful and promising. And I think one thing that helps to start to change that, besides the first and most important step, which is awareness of your four selves, is looking at other people too. In particular, Summer, speaking of childhood stuff, your parents. I was thinking about this actually, like my dad. My most dreaded self of my dad's was his red self. I was so afraid of his red self. And I kinda had 2 dads, one before my mom died and one after my dad died. So I'm talking about the dad after my mom died because he was just devastated and very traumatized for a lot of years. His most familiar self to me was blue. He was very depressed, he was very shut down. It still affects me today when I think about the despair of this guy and just wanting to die so that he could be with my mom. So that was his most familiar self to me, okay? My dad's most favorite self to me was yellow when he was at a party, when he was playing cards, when he was engaging with life. Like that was my favorite self of my dad. And my least familiar self of my dad was green. And I think that's because in a way he would hide the green or like go very private. Like he went to church every morning at 6:30 after my mom died and he loved being there. He found peace, he could connect with my mom. And so that was his least familiar self to me because I think he kept it very private. So it's interesting to think about your parents and their four selves. Now, there's a few comments here. Hi, Robin. It is so good to see you. You're going to go run and create some yellow to lead a dance class. And Robin's got it right. Like we can create different colors to match the environment that we're going into. And I love seeing the community here. Yeah. Oh my gosh, Summer, you have this brilliant thing about how, like, your most dreaded self of your dad was red and the fear that you would have of that. And then you often act just like your father when you're in red. That's crazy and good and wild to me because then it's like, okay, this was one of the points that I wanted to get to. When we're in a familiar self that we adopted from early childhood programming or past experiences, and it doesn't mode match today, I'm out of congruence. I can't act in alignment with my own values, my own principles of integrity, because I'm in some other chemical state that's just my most familiar, chemically comfortable, patterned default mode network, but it doesn't match, right? Like the text with my sister, she was being loving and kind, but I was seeing it in red and attacking her. I don't want to be attacking somebody that I love and is kind and good to me. Um, so each self has its things that it does in your relationships, in your body, and each self has things that it's excited by and afraid of. So Summer says, yes, fear of stillness. Once I go blue, I freeze and then I can't get going again. That's the perfect, accurate description of what happens to most of us in blue. We can't get going. So blue has its things it's afraid of. How do you develop more awareness of your most favorite self, your least favorite self, sorry, I got that wrong. Well, yeah, favorite self, dreaded self, most familiar, least familiar. You can navigate all these once you start naming them. And I think sometimes because we're so close to ourselves, it helps by looking at other people. And maybe don't just pick the like difficult ones. Pick an easy one. Pick an easy person. Yesterday, a wonderful, lovely gentleman named Dr. John Lynn, he's a urologist in Arizona. He had me on his channel and he interviewed me. And John is one of those people that, in my experience of him, you just can't help but be happy when you're around him. And so I was thinking about my experience of John's 4 selves. And my experience of John, the most familiar, is definitely yellow. He's just always motivated and taking action, inspiring other people. And he's got the funniest names, right? Like super playful. He's got exterminator.com because he's a urologist and he does vasectomies. So he's got exterminator.com. And then he also has another one called Make America Pee Again. And he did this whole like political spoof on his commercial. And so his just energy in the world is very playful and fun. And one of the things that struck me, I asked, like, how are you the way that you are? And he says, number one, hands down, gratitude. He says, I am just like to be alive. Like he's just grateful. That makes me emotional. And so I think his most familiar self as I experience him is green. What's his most familiar self? Probably green. This is how I experience him. What's my favorite self or his favorite self? Yellow. Right? What's his most dreaded self or least familiar self? I don't know. I would imagine that's like his least familiar, the blue, and the most dreaded is red. It's just a way to start thinking about this with other people to help you think about yourself. So, talk to me. What people do you know famous in your world who have like their most familiar self is yellow? They're a good and look, depends on what you want in life. If you want your most familiar self to stay red, by all means, keep looking at, hanging out with, and spending time with people who have a default mode network of red. But think about that for yourself. What kind of self do you want to be your most familiar self? I definitely want green. Who should I look to as an example for that? What kind of activities can I do to start wiring that in? Who talk to me? Who's a person that embodies green for you? Gandhi, right? Mother Teresa. Who's somebody that you know? I want to hear from you. Who are your green people? Their most familiar self. Who are your yellow people? Their most familiar is yellow. My dog, I think he right now is doing a really good job of embodying green. He's just calm, chill, relaxed, sleepy. Oh, Brene Brown. Good call for sure. What color does Brene Brown's most familiar self represent to you? Yeah. And that's an interesting thought too. Um, Balanced rock. Tell me more about that emoji that you just put up there. It's laughing. Thich Nhat Hanh. Oh, totally. The wisdom in that man when I think about that. Yeah, it always seems to calm me to listen to him, Sam, and that's perfect. And it lines up because the word calm is right there in green. 6 pleasant, 4 energy. It's a really nice place to be. Oh, balanced rock for the pup. Yeah, he's freaking he I get cute aggression with him. For those of you that don't know what cute aggression is, I've nicknamed it cagey. He makes me really cagey. And I want to come back to you, Summer, about Brene Brown, because cute aggression is this interesting thing that happens. Oh, balanced rock. I'm totally uh sister to another mister with you here. I feel myself matching people's colors, learning how to hold on to my own. Mm, yeah. Okay. I have a lot to say about a couple things here. And balanced rock, I'm just energetically sending you a hit, a wave of just some positive energy because I'm very much working on that on my own, right? It's that individuation, that differentiation. Like, can I have an experience that is separate to you, right? We see the world as we are, not as it is. And because my most chemically familiar self is red, I'm going to see the world as red. This thing on, there's a couple things here. Balanced rock. What are you doing to hold on to your own? Because for me, the more I'm like grounded and connected in my body, the more I can stand on my own and see another as separate. Like, we're connected as humans, but we're separate. And that's why I like the color of like just an assessment of how does this other person live in the world and what colors are they? I want to show this one thing and then I'm going to come back to Summer about Brene Brown. So, like balanced rock, let me know what you do to hold on to your own. But I have this giant twister board of the mood meter, and there's no words on it, but it's the 4 colors. And what I do is I'll stand in a color, and then I'll notice the effect that it has on me, and I just instantly I feel heavy and sad as I stand here in blue, and I feel this, like, sink down, like, I wanna kinda do this, and so this blue has a posture in me. And I this is just a familiar emotional motor program, and so all this stuff is subconscious until we make it conscious, right? And so what I do subconsciously, and it's becoming more conscious, is I don't like this, so then I like rise up, and because the computer and the way everything's set, so then I don't like this here, so I rise up. And that's where I go into red more and more and more often as a way out of blue. And so this autonomic dysregulated roller coaster, it's like I'm kind of stuck in a freeze between the two, right? So I'm stuck here in this frozen collapse. And then here to get out of it, my back is tight, my neck is tight because it's trying to pull me out of this collapse. And that's why this is my most favorite self, familiar self, and this is my dreaded self, because that pattern in my body got wired in when I was so young. Now, and then enter in like a whole bunch of self-sabotage because I want to be happy, right? But my body keeps pulling me back here because these are the grooves that are wired. And so one practice is to just stand in a box and notice the effect that it has on you, right? Because when I'm standing and stuck here, I'm actually going to be more inclined to merge with other people, um, because I need to get out, and my only way out is here, and that's not sustainable. So when I'm stuck here, I'll merge with other people and be really codependent and create a lot of chaos and rescuing and drama triangle, victim persecuting, rescuing it, and my gut hurts and I'm anxious and so it's good for me to stand here and remember, oh look, there's choice. What happens? Where can I move to? And what happens when I'm here in green, right? It's not familiar. And so it's going to feel uncomfortable. But it's like, can I tolerate this discomfort for a few minutes for the purpose of growth? Oftentimes, when I first move into green, I want to cry um, because it's like a release. But so as I stand here in green and I'm with you all, it's like, oh, the thing that I was expecting isn't happening. Like all hell didn't break loose. This is a good place of stillness. Like I can be calm here, right? Like I can embody Thich Nhat Hanh from here. And so you obviously you don't have a map like this at home, but you can kind of pick four squares or four corners in a room and then just go stand in one, right? My most favorite self of yellow, I'm noticing in this moment right now, like it's actually kind of tiring and I'd prefer to go back to green because this feels pretty darn sustainable and calm and peaceful. But it also brings up fears like, oh shit, I can't get anything done here. And so that's an interesting practice. What's up, DJ Renee? I look like a rapper. Yeah. I got to start co-regulating with Eminem. Oh my God. Don't get me started on rapping. I need to do more improv training before we go there. Ah. Balanced rock. I love what you're saying here. Um Yeah, get into that step and know it. Here's the other thing, balanced rock, like practicing standing in the different colors. Get to know yourself there. Step into it and just kind of experience it and what flavors, like what fears come up for you, what good things, what thoughts, how do you see the world? Right? Balanced rock, you try to take space and recenter, like step away from the energy, and you have to physically distance. And sometimes I do too. But sometimes I can't. Like I'm in a session with a patient, which is sort of this good provocation that has forced me to develop this. Like, can I be comfortable in all four of those arenas within me? Because if I can, then I can be that much more comfortable when other people are in those colors. And I can be more allowing and more accepting and more loving. And then honestly, totally embody way more Thich Nhat Hanh because he's, would imagine, really good at tolerating all four of those colors in other people. Celeste, welcome. You want to play Mood Twister? I totally want to play Mood Twister with you. And I actually have a game for next week. I'm pretty excited. So everybody show up for next week because we're going to do some Mood Meter Twister. That was just the perfect lead in, Celeste. Okay, Summer, you want a nervous system like Marcus. Yes, understanding myself in the four colors would help me understand others in them. Balanced rock, that just makes me feel loving. Like when I get that from you, it makes me feel totally green. Because if I am okay with everything, then everything is okay. And I need to be okay with everything in me for me to be okay with everything in other people and everything in life. Life will give us everything, whether we want it or not. And we'll just default into our most common grooves, and then we'll get those outcomes. And if you're like Dr. John Lynn, lucky you, because his most familiar and favorite selves are yellow and green. So he's going to see and experience life more in that way. But if you're like me, you're going to have more red and blue struggles and you're going to have more of that in life. Scooter Lee. I have not yet mentioned this week. I mentioned it last week. You can acquire this chart if you email me, I will gladly get it over to you. We're working on getting it on the website, but it's not there yet. So email me at info@greentreemind.com. I will totally email you this chart. It's called the mood meter. I did modify it because in Mark Brackett's, he's got unpleasant and pleasant. And I think it's really important to have the whole thing be pleasant because my background's physical therapy and I'm trying to help people get out of pain. And we don't get like better from pain, we get better at pleasant. So, oh, Sam, thanks for helping out, Scooter. Summer, why is it easier to tolerate 4 colors in our patients versus family or close friends? What a great question. Um, and is it due to expectations of our close people? Yeah, and our wants with them, and we don't have yes. You said it right there. It's easier to tolerate the 4 colors in people that you don't know as well because they're less likely to run as deep and suck you into these deep grooves within your own nervous system, right? Like family and friends primes the pump for negative expectancy. Like my sister in her text this morning, I was all red because there's some pretty common red historical grooves between the two of us. Like she's the one that gave me very bad news. Like, yeah, that's your mom that just had a brain aneurysm. Like I'm in a very red place by default mode with my sister. So my system's more primed versus with somebody that I don't know as well, like a patient, for example. I'm pretty primed to go into a session in a very yellow way because I've been intentional and wired that in. So I'm going to default to more yellow and it's less likely that I'll get pulled out by a patient. Although it does happen if their story resonates, something that's familiar from my past or uh, like personal or professional. So bash that like button, boxing and bulldogs. Thank you. For today, I would love to wrap up. Before I do, what questions do you have? What thoughts do you have? And what is your takeaway message? What do you want to be sure to take away from today? Angry Peach. Is it basically that there's less possible consequences in informal relationships? Totally. Oh, yes. Are there less possible consequences? It's funny, Angry Peach, because as I'm sitting with that question, the negative bias in me is like, yes. And consequences has such a negative terminology. Um, and so we're more likely to take risk if there's less likelihood of a negative event or a negative experience. All right. Next week we're gonna do yeah. Angry Peach, I like you so much. You know, I'm a negative person myself, and I want to just respectfully challenge you a little bit. That might just be your most familiar self. When I hear I'm a negative person, I'm like, yeah, I know that version of myself. Pessimistic, right? Repulsed and pessimistic are like to look at this. I'm getting a little high. Like I get a dopamine hit when I think about that because for me, it's such a familiar state and there's so much pleasure in that. It's like an existential kink for me. Like, uh, we, I, there's a woman named Carolyn Elliott that wrote a book called Existential Kink. And she says that having is evidence of wanting. And so if you have something, that means somewhere in your system you want it. And I guess I can see you being angry, a negative person, angry Peach. I see that in me too, and I have pleasure with that. Like the sensation in this moment is pleasure, which validates my point to have this whole thing be pleasant. Like I'm experiencing a really strong energy of pleasant because it's like, yeah, you're a negative person. I am too. Look at that. I'm not alone. And I think it's really important and helpful to remember that that's not all of me and that's not all of who I am, right? Like there's those circuits in me. They might be very well traveled, very well familiar, very well chemically comfortable, but that doesn't mean it's the whole of who I am because we all have all colors. Mentioning there are different chemicals in different states of mind is helpful. Scooterly, totally. And I think it's as unique for you and me and Summer and Angry Peach as our fingerprint, right? Because I will tell you, I can get really like a dopamine high, an insane like cocaine rush from red. And it's very much connected to the pessimistic, like expecting negative. But for some people, they might get more dopamine in yellow or green. I think it's so different for everybody. I think there's commonalities, right? High energy is going to be more adrenalized, norepinephrine, all the other like endorphins that give us energy. And low energy down here is probably going to have more serotonin, more oxytocin. That's as comfortable as I would feel saying what chemicals are, because then so much of it comes into our individual blueprint, fingerprint of what is unique to us based on our past experience. Scooterly, what does that bring up for you? What thoughts do you have about that? Angry Peach, you're a former optimistic person and devolved into pessimism because you feel that it rids me from expectations. Oh, that is such a pattern that I bet everybody here can relate to, right? I think we come in as babies pretty darn peaceful. And then these life events start happening. You know, we all have our sort of influences, but like babies are a pretty fairly neutral, like it's a blank canvas, right? And like kids are hopeful. Kids are like puppies. Like they expect good things until something bad happens. And then they stop expecting good things and hoping for good things because it's a protective mechanism against something bad happening. And so that's a beautiful, correct, biologically appropriate mechanism, because you're expecting something bad is going to happen because in the past it did. And you can protect yourself from feeling that way by just not expecting anything good to come, which then also deprives us of good things and creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. And then see, look, I was right. And that's just because you have a familiar self and a dreaded self. I think those two go oftentimes very hand in hand and connected. So next week, we're going to do a little more um, twister board mood meter. I have really enjoyed this time and space with you all here today. And I want to thank you for being here. And I will be here next Monday. If you want this copy, I can send it to you. Go ahead and email me at info@greentreemind.com. And if today's content brought up anything for you that you want to troubleshoot and work through, schedule a free consult with me. If you go to www.greentreemind.com, you can sign up for a free 20-minute consult on my website. I like troubleshooting and problem solving. It's really fun and playful for me. And if you want to chat more about your dreaded selves and favorite selves and want to wire in more familiar self and favorite self that's congruent with your values and how you want to live, just reach out and I would love to have a conversation. Happy Monday, everybody. Wishing you a beautiful week. I'm on a different computer. I'm not familiar with what's happening here. Go away. Stop. Angry Peach. Is it possible that those 20 minutes might be extended to like 30 or 40? It depends on what state I'm in. Um, I like respecting my time boundaries and my schedule and the people after me. So if I run for 30 to 40 minutes with you, I'm going to run late with the person behind me. So out of respect and from my green self, I'm going to say, no, they can't go over. But I would still love to meet you and just plug in that time can shift depending on what physiological state we're in. So if we're in a more green place, we can find this miracle of like there is enough time in the world. It's pretty cool. Scooter Lee. Oh, thank you. I'm so glad that you get a lot from my offerings. I appreciate you saying that. Balanced Rock. Oh God, I almost want to cry. Every time I go green with you, Balanced Rock, who are you? Tell me, tell me. Send me an email. I'd love to connect with you there. You really appreciate me. Your videos have been life-changing on my healing journey. So thank you for that. I think that's really touching. And I've shared all of this because it was helpful for me, and it does feel like a privilege and a responsibility to pass it on to others. And so I'm glad that you're receiving from it. Uh, Celeste, thank you. I appreciate you being here. Reach out, send me an email, info@greentreemind.com, schedule a free consult. Angry Peach, I see, no problem. Haha. I just think you're great. I'm really glad all of you were here today. Thank you. And I look forward to connecting with you. And we'll see you next week for some mood meter improv. All right, everybody. Take care. Have a good week.